We will start this hour, though, with this exclusive interview that I've done with the family of Gaia Pope, who've told me that truth and justice for her matter more than any delay to the inquest into her death. You'll remember the background to this. Gaia disappeared in Swanage in November 2017. She was 19 years old. Sadly, her body was found on cliffs near Swanage 11 days later. Now, her family believe that she died due to failings by police and mental health services following an allegation of rape. This week, we heard that an inquest into her death will not examine that investigation, but will include the impact of that investigation on her mental health. The inquest will now take place in May of next year, not January. Now, we spoke earlier on this week to Katie Russell from Rape Crisis England and Wales, but the first voice you'll hear here is Gaia's cousin, Marienna Pope-Weideman.
The delays are extremely painful for us. I mean, this whole process means that we essentially have to revisit and scrutinise the most traumatic and painful chapter of our lives. And personally, there's nothing that we want more than for it to be over. But truth and justice matter more. Improvements for survivors that we know need to be made matter more. And that's why, despite our feelings, we requested this delay because it's necessary. There's huge gaps in the evidence still, the impact of the COVID pandemic. And so, we're pleased that the coroner's granted it. I think another big victory for us was in terms of scope. Obviously, Gaia's rape case can't come to trial because she's not here to testify, and that's a wound that for us will never heal. But the coroner seems, really committed to a full and fearless inquest into what happened. We're enormously grateful to her for agreeing to a full inquest with a jury, and crucially to include a complete investigation into the mental health impact that Gaia's rape case had, both in terms of how she was treated by the police and the support that she got. And I think anything we can do to spotlight that would make Gaia enormously proud.
I wonder if this is a slight cul-de-sac, but talk to me about the time elapsed. I'm always staggered that inquests seem to happen so long after the events in question, and I understand that in this case there is a lot of evidence to be pulled together, but still here we are 3 years on from Gaia's death, and we're still basically a year away from the inquest properly getting started.
It's extremely difficult. I think, as you say, there are many families who find themselves in this situation. Sometimes it really feels like a David and Goliath struggle, but we're not alone. Thankfully we have a really, really incredible legal team, support from allies like Rape Crisis, like Inquest and the Centre for Women's Justice, and we're determined to keep coming back for as long as it takes.
You've said all along, Marienna, that you want justice for Gaia. Do you have a sense of what that would look like?
There's so many gaps in the picture still that we don't have a complete answer in terms of what justice for Gaia looks like. Gaia will never be able to press her case. In terms of the inquest and justice for Gaia more broadly, it has to be about survivors being supported, not just through the criminal justice system, but also in terms of mental health. Listening across to us is Katie Russell from Rape Crisis. Katie, good morning to you.
Morning.
There's a lot to talk about here. People will have heard about the low levels of prosecution and conviction in rape cases. And I wonder what kind of an impact that specifically has.
It's important to remember that the vast majority of those who are raped or sexually assaulted or sexually abused currently choose not to report to the police. And what victims and survivors who we work with at rape crisis centres across England and Wales tell us is that, among the reasons for that, and they are many and complex, are very much the fear of the criminal justice system, the fear of its length, and that they might put themselves through this incredibly difficult, sometimes re-traumatizing process for easily 2 years, sometimes more, only to receive no concrete justice at the end of the process and be made to feel, like the ones on trial. So I think gradually more victims and survivors are starting to come forward to report, and yet prosecution conviction rates are at all-time lows, and as a result, inevitably the majority of perpetrators are walking free. And if this was any other crime so incredibly serious, with such wide-ranging, lifelong impacts on victims and survivors' lives, their health, their families, their communities, it would be considered a national emergency, and there would be much more public outcry.
Marienna, just finally, 3 years on from these events, I just wonder, I don't know if this is a bit glib, but there's often talk of closure, and, you know, time passing tends to make the pain slightly less. I wonder where you as a family are at, and how much and how often you miss Gaia.
This is always the hardest question for me to answer, because it's just so hard to put into words how much this hurts. Sometimes it feels like she just disappeared, and sometimes it feels like we're still searching for her, you know, and sometimes I have to remind myself that it doesn't matter how hard I work or how many interviews we do, we're never going to get her back. The gut-wrenching horror that many people experience in the early stage of grief when they lose someone they love, it stays with us, because the whole investigation forces us to keep reliving the trauma without being able to process or resolve anything. This cycle of experiencing and having to re-experience, this idea of re-traumatization is, you know, a huge parallel and hugely significant for what she went through.
Marienna Pope-Weideman there, Gaia Pope's cousin, talking to me earlier this week exclusively, and Katie Russell from Rape Crisis England and Wales. The third anniversary of Gaia's disappearance and death is coming up in November of this year, and we will be marking that on this show.
BBC